everybody! I'm back! Happy 2019! It's been a while. Don't think that this video is coming to you because it's 2019 and I'm starting a fresh leaf, necessarily. It's more so for two big reasons, one of which was that I read a BuzzFeed article about millennial burnout, and there was a part talking about errand paralysis, which really resonated with me, so it made me want to get a bunch of stuff on my proverbial list out of the way, and this was one of the things. And as well, yesterday I made the mistake of walking into a hair salon for an appointment, do like a walk-in appointment, taking the one that was available, saying yeah it was fine, and not asking for the price of the stylist, and subsequently overpaid way too much money for getting my hair cut. Not that that person doesn't deserve to charge more for a haircut, more because I'm cheap and I don't really like to pay for the most senior stylist in the salon, which is what ended up happening. So because my hair looks nice and I've just had it cut and it's all beautiful, I thought I'd take the opportunity to take the most advantage of it by looking good in a video that I put on the internet. Also, I just wanted to show you my new sweater that I got for Christmas this year. I saw it online and I told my mom that I wanted it, and I got it, and I'm so happy. You gotta love archaeology memes, right? As I've said before, I've been having a lot of like nostalgia lately as I approach the fact that it's been almost 10 years since I went on my first field school and discovered my like real love for the field aspect of archaeology. So I'm going to now tell you the story of when I went on my trip to Israel after I went to my first field school. So this story is not necessarily a lot about archaeology or archaeology tips. If that's what you're looking for, please check out pretty much almost any other video on my channel. I can almost guarantee that any question that you have will be answered there. Just to give you a bit of background, if you haven't watched the previous video where I talked about my time at field school, summer of 2010, I went on a field school in the Kingdom of Jordan with my undergraduate university. There was a requirement to my degree that we had to complete a certain number of weeks doing archaeological excavation, and this field school was one of the ones offered by my school. It was in the Middle East. It was very exciting. That's what I initially was interested in, was the archaeology in that area, and all my friends were going on it. While we were planning this trip, three of my friends and I decided that we wanted to tack on a little bit of extra traveling at the end, since we weren't sure if we were ever going to go back to the area, and you know, we'd already been learning so much about it that we wanted to take advantage of the fact that we'd already paid the plane fare to get over to that side of the world and do some extra traveling over the summer. So this ended up being a 1 week and a bit trip to Israel, and then after that we went to Egypt for another week and a bit. For this specific video, I just want to preface everything by saying that I am not a religious person, and Israel is a place where, you know, the three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, they all have some very significant stuff going on there. A lot of the stuff that we saw there were religious sites. So even though I'm not religious myself, I just want to emphasize some respect in terms of this stuff, because even if I don't particularly believe in those things or the things that they represent, those sites, they mean a lot and they have a lot of significance to a lot of people. So I have no intention in this video to disrespect anybody's religion or beliefs. If I'm crossing that line, I apologize in advance, but I'd also like to request that anyone that's commenting down below about these things also remain respectful in their comments. Start off from the very beginning. In terms of planning this trip, we were very conscious that we didn't really know any of the languages, we weren't experienced with this region, so my friends and I, we decided to go through a travel agent for booking all of our stuff and to take tours rather than backpacking ourselves all over the place. We figured this would be kind of like the most efficient way to see all the things that we wanted to see. It would be the safest way to do it, and in some ways the most cost effective. The way it kind of worked out was that we had 2 tours booked, but because of the way the timing worked, we got like kind of like extra days and half days all over the place. The amount of food that we got in the tours was variable. The Israeli one, we definitely got breakfast every day, but we would usually have to buy like lunch and dinner, and you know, with a lot of tours, they will take you deliberately to somewhere that's gonna maybe charge you a little bit more than they normally would. So I know one of my friends, he was like really trying to do things cheaply, so he would just like steal croissants and fruit from all of our breakfast buffets and use that for his lunch every day, which was a really good way to keep costs low. So first things first, to give you a rough idea of where we went, this is a map that I made on Google Maps of all the places that I can remember / I can see, and some of the photos that I still have from this of where we went. So we kind of went in a big circle of Israel for the actual tour. As things started off, we were in Jordan, so we had to get to Israel and where our tour was starting. To be honest, I do not remember this well. I know that we had basically like a bit of a private bus that had a couple other people in it from, that I think we left from Madaba, which is where we were staying, and we went to Jerusalem. So I just drew like a line on that map to represent that journey, because when I tried to do it on Google Maps, it said that you like went all the way up to the Sea of Galilee and then back down to Jerusalem. I don't think that's the crossing that we went at, but I don't remember. Crossing from Jordan into Israel was a very long process. You basically kind of like stopped, got off your bus at one side of the border, got cleared through everything, and then you got back on your bus, drove like 100 meters or something over the border, and then had to stop at the other end and go through another process to get into Israel. That particular process was like kind of scary as someone who's never really had to do it before, and I think if you know anything about the tensions in that region, it's a pretty intensive process. For example, I was traveling with like a big backpacker's backpack, which I had spent quite a bit of time packing to make sure that everything fit. It went through like a security line like it would at an airport, and then some guy just basically ripped the entire thing apart looking for things. They almost confiscated my trowels, but so I had to kind of like explain that they weren't weapons or anything. But that was a bit irritating. I also noticed that everyone that was working in the terminal was like absolutely stunning. Like all the women had hair like down to the middle of their backs, and all the guys were really like fit and good looking. Like it was very kind of odd. That was something that really stuck with me, that was that everyone was absolutely beautiful who was working as essentially like the Israeli equivalent of a TSA agent. Also, one of the stories I always tell about this is about the guy that got taken away. So like I said, they're very thorough when they're going through your luggage at this checkpoint. And I just remember there was a guy, he kind of looked a bit like kind of hipster backpacker kind of type coming over from Jordan. He had clearly been traveling. I don't know if he'd been like working somewhere on like a project or a volunteer thing or whatever, but I just remember someone pulling out a flag, I don't remember which flag, from his backpack and spreading it out, and someone, clearly whoever he'd been with, a bunch of people had signed it, and then someone had drawn a helicopter with the Star of David on it, shooting bullets at people, at little stick figures on the flag, which was like, oh. And then he disappeared subsequently into a room and we didn't see him again. Not to imply anything about what happened to him, but I highly doubt that he went into Israel. I think from what I remember, he had probably previously been in Syria and then gone through into Jordan and then back into, and was trying to get into Israel, but educated guess, don't think he made it into Israel. After we made it through the very long, like couple-hour process of security, we then went and drove to Jerusalem, where we were staying for the evening, which the difference between Israel and Jordan is like, it is weird. It's like going from a country where you have to throw your toilet paper into a bin instead of flushing it, and you have to be really conscious about your water use, and you know, there's kind of like garbage a lot of the places because they've only just recently implemented like garbage collection. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's like a third world country, but like a second world country. It's definitely not like Canada. And then crossing the border into Israel, it was like being back in Canada. There was just like clearly so much more money had been pumped into it for like infrastructure, roads, like plumbing, all that kind of stuff. You could flush your toilet paper. It was quite a bit jarring. But then on the other side as well, it was just a lot more tense. In Jordan, you know, you go anywhere near the border and stuff, you'll see soldiers and they have guns, and you know, you'll see like armored vehicles and stuff, but like it's near a border, that's kind of expected. And a lot of people in Jordan do have guns, but don't walk around with them, or you don't really see them. Whereas in Israel, I just remember in Jerusalem, we checked into our hotel and we went to go get something to eat. We'd gone to a burger place across the way. We were sitting outside having our burgers, just like reveling about the fact that we were in Jerusalem, having a chat. There was Bob Marley playing on the stereo at the burger place, and then I just saw someone walking down the street in like civvies with an AK-47, and it was just like, did not expect to see that. It's not to imply that they were gonna like start using it, but like it's just this like undertone of like tension was definitely there. And that's not to say anything bad about like Israel and Jerusalem. That's just how I felt. That evening after we arrived, my friends and I decided to do a bit of a recce, as they call it. And we went to the old city through the Jaffa Gate. We walked around and then almost stumbled onto the Temple Mount because we kind of the route that we took, we were about to walk through a door and then we realized that the Dome of the Rock was there and we were like, oh, and that there were a bunch of security guards, so we just turned back around. It was really cool to like almost just like happen upon it by accident. The next day, we had arranged a independent tour to go see Masada, which, in case you don't know what it is basically this giant rock like on the shores of the Dead Sea that was originally like a palace fortress built by King Herod, that is most famous for during a war between the Jews and the Romans. There was a sect of people that took refuge in it and slaughtered the Roman garrison, and then the Roman army came along and basically besieged them for however long, and at the end of it, when the Romans were going to enter the fort, there's a story that's been written down by a Roman historian that says that all the inhabitants of the fort committed mass suicide rather than be taken captive, and at the end there were like only 2 women and 5 children left. Archaeologically, that the numbers of how many people killed themselves and how many of the Romans were killed is debated, but it's a really interesting site. If you're looking for a good book to read about Masada, like a fiction book, not a historical account book, I would highly recommend The Dove Keepers by Alice Hoffman. You can hike up to the fortress, which we didn't do because you have to I think you have to start at a specific time of day. You don't want to do it in the middle of the day. It's too hot. Or you can do the easy thing, which is what we did, where you take a cable car up to the top, because yeah, it's not just a matter of like a couple steps. It's not easy to get to. It is very remote. The actual site is really cool to walk around, especially because they've actually done some like conservation restoration work where they've kind of restored not the entire buildings but parts of them, and as you can see from this picture that I'm going to show, the people who did all the work have tried to make it very clear what was still upstanding when they excavated and what they've put down by having these like black lines for the restoration work. So that was really cool to see that being put in practice while we were there. Getting back to after our day tour, we then took a cab to Tel Aviv because that's where our tour was actually starting. When we got into Tel Aviv, we went to our hotel where the tour was starting and discovered that it was like right next to the Mediterranean, which was amazing. We went out and got like I think burgers or something for dinner again, and then we all decided to go swimming in the Mediterranean, which was amazing. I absolutely loved it. Like, it was just really crazy to go night swimming in the Mediterranean. I don't know, it was just a really great experience. I really enjoyed that. The next day, our tour started, and our first stop was a place called Caesarea, which was a like Roman city town. It was a port. Really interesting Roman archaeology there. We went to see the archaeological park. They have like a huge hippodrome, which has like a cool like wire metal installation of like a chariot, and they had some really cool pottery left over that they'd found in doing like marine archaeology from like the ships in the bay, and like the anchors that people used to use, like these giant big pieces of stone that they used to use as anchors. And then correct me if I'm wrong, marine archaeologists, but they'd have this like store all these stone anchors and they'd throw them over the edge to anchor the ship, and then when they needed to not be anchored anymore, they just cut the rope and leave the anchor because they didn't have a means of like hauling it up efficiently, because like that is gonna be heavy. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were basically like disposable anchors just carved out of stone. The next stop after we did that was Haifa, Again, it's like a coastal city, and there we were actually going to see the Baha'i gardens. We weren't allowed to go really into them. You were allowed to go to a certain point, but you couldn't go into the gardens because that's only for people of the Baha'i faith. But you could kind of like look over them. They're very pretty, but they're also, again, very strict about stuff. Like, you weren't allowed to put your feet on the balustrades. I made the mistake of doing that accidentally. I'm very sorry, because like of the implied dirtiness of it and stuff, which was really, it was a really beautiful thing to see. After that, we went over to Nazareth, which some of you who are Christian may have heard of that place. Our stop there was to go see the Church of Annunciation, which is basically the Church of Mary. It's built incorporating and over top of, with like a bit underneath, an archaeological site. This Church of the Annunciation is where Christians believe the house of Mary, the mother of Jesus, was located. The actual house is apparently somewhere in Italy. This is based upon an inscription in a doorway that they discovered during archaeological works. So this particular bit is preserved within the church that you can go and look at, although we didn't get to go inside. And then the rest of the excavations is outside of the church, but there's like a giant open space, like they've built a place for people to walk around and stuff over top of the archaeological excavations to preserve them. Another thing I really liked about this church was that they have murals on the walls representing Mary and Jesus from all these different countries and all in really distinctive styles. So I can't show you the Canada one because my picture of it is just awful, but it's all like carved out of wood. The one that I liked the best was the Japanese one, which is like a mosaic. It's really interesting to see all the different ways that people see Mary and Jesus and how they represent them artistically. So I quite liked seeing that. Directly after Nazareth, we went to a place called Safed, which is like a town city in the north of Israel that's like a Kabbalah center, or at least that's the impression that I got from our tour guide. Like, it's a place where like Kabbalah really thrives, and it's like a really big part of that community. It was a really beautiful little town. I really enjoyed going around it. It had like a very kind of like small town, like quaint feel to it. I really like things that are quaint. That's also where I took the opportunity to buy some art. I like to try and buy like a not expensive piece of art from wherever I visit. So I'm just going to show it to you because I still have it. This is the piece of artwork that I bought when we were in Safed. I think it's supposed to be of Jerusalem, but obviously it's quite abstract. I just really love the colors, the gold, how reflective it is. It's just like an absolutely beautiful piece, and I love that I can still have it in my house and have that memory of that place that I went to. I also bought another like Kabbalah wheel piece, but I have that stored away somewhere because I've never been able to get it like kind of like sort of framed, because that's not officially framed. I don't really recall where we stopped and stayed on many of these trips, except for one spot, so I'm just kind of like keep going until bits where I remember where we stayed overnight. We went and we did this bit, which is a bit more fuzzy for me, where we went to see the Golan Heights. We didn't actually go and walk around them. There's like a visiting spot where you can go and like look over them into Lebanon, basically, which is quite a nice scenery. But that bit of the country is much more tight security wise, and because that was part of the 6 Days War with Israel and the countries around it, you know, half a century ago, they're really strict about what you can and cannot do. So for example, we were told, you know, if we were getting off the bus that we can't go to either side of the roads because there were still like landmines all over the place, and nobody wants to get blown up. We also went to a kibbutz around there, which is kind of like, it's a community of people where they all like live and they share things, and like it's kind of like a hippie community of Jewish people. That's kind of how I think of it in my mind. They will all work together, and usually they also produce stuff to sell on behalf of the kibbutz to like make money so everyone can like eat and sleep and everything, and they hold tours and they will derive revenue from that. So we went there. We weren't allowed to take pictures, so I didn't. We had lunch there. That's all I really remember about it, but I couldn't tell you what kibbutz it was, where it was. I was asleep on the bus most of the time to and from, so I just have no recollection of where it was, rather than it was up around the Golan Heights. The next thing we did was a wine tour, which made us all feel really fancy because we were all like 1920, around this time, like not exactly the kind of people that frequent wine tours or really know anything about wine, but we did a wine tour. It was called the Golan Heights Winery. Very, very nice place to go. That night we went and we stayed in Tiberias. I do distinctly remember this, and the hotel that we stayed in for some reason. So Tiberias is a city that's on the Sea of Galilee. It has some archaeological stuff in it, but I don't think we actually went to go see any of it. We just kind of spent the night wandering around the city. My two friends, they decided they wanted to go swimming in the Sea of Galilee. They were happy to do that. I thought it smelled kind of funny and I wasn't keen to put on my bathing suit, so I just decided not to, and I stayed on the beach and watched their stuff. I made a point, as I said in my last video, to go to McDonald's because I saw one and I was just like, I have to just, for whatever reason, it really strikes me as like, wow, this thing that's so familiar about home, a half a world away, I just have to go, just for the novelty of it. And also, you know what, it was cheap food, so that was good. The next day, we went to Capernaum, which is where the Church of St. Peter and the House of St. Peter are within an archaeological park, and we walked around there, saw the most diseased looking cat I've ever seen in my life in that archaeological park. In case you didn't know, generally in the Middle East, they're not as keen on pets as we are in the West, and there are feral cats and dogs everywhere. There were feral cats all over Capernaum, and I just remember I saw one, it just like, it looked real sketchy. It was covered in scabs and one of its eyes was like closed over and it was clearly like blind out of one eye, and it was just like, ugh. From Capernaum, we went to a baptismal site. It's called Yardenit. It's right at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. Now, there are a variety of sites that are attributed to the site of Jesus's baptism, and one of them's on the Jordanian side of the river, of the Jordan River. One of them's on the Israeli side of the Jordanian River. Archaeologically speaking, I don't think there's really any way to know for sure where exactly along the river that this happened. The bit that they've now built up for this baptismal site was actually really beautiful. It was like a really beautiful part of the river. Very nice looking. We got to walk around in the river itself, which was, you know, nice and refreshing because it was really hot during the middle of the summer in the Middle East, unsurprisingly, in the middle of the day. So after the baptism site, we proceeded down to Beit Shan, which is or Beit Sha'en, Beit Sha'in, I can't really remember how to pronounce it properly. Another city that's got like a big archaeological park in the middle of it, mostly Roman stuff that you're looking at there. Like they have beautiful Roman roads. Like I love a Roman road, man. They're just so beautiful. They're just such beautiful works of engineering. Beit Shan originally was called Scythopolis, and it was a part of the Decapolis, which were like a bunch of city-states in Israel around the time of the Roman Empire that kind of like formed kind of like the frontier, quote unquote. So there were a bunch of cities that had like a similar language, culture, whatever. And I think they used to think that they all kind of like had a bit of a political alliance, but from what I was reading on Wikipedia yesterday, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Once we finished that Beit Shan, we made our way back to Jerusalem. Again, as per the map that I showed, I don't really know what route that we took. Like, I knew nothing about roads. Like, Google Maps, and it was not a thing on your phone back then, even if I had data. We didn't stop at Jericho, which like, oh, that's like one place that I really love to go back to, is to go see Jericho. I would just, oh, that would be amazing. But we went back to Jerusalem, stayed at another hotel. That evening we had to ourselves, and my friends and I decided we were gonna go and explore the old city again. The previous time we kind of gone to see the Western Wall, but we hadn't really like gone up to it. So we decided we were gonna do that. The girls, we all took like scarves to cover our heads, and went through, maybe did a little bit of souvenir shopping, went up to the Western Wall, and also to see about being able to get on the top of the Temple Mount, because you can't just waltz onto it whenever you feel like it, because it is still an active religious site for Muslims. It was cool to go to the Western Wall, but also kind of one of those times when you're just like, ugh, because as you will perhaps be able to see from the next picture, there's a men's and a women's side. You know, Orthodox Jews are very, like, they do practice like segregation of the sexes, especially when it comes to religious worship. So it's interesting because whenever you see the Western Wall on documentaries, they don't really talk about it that much, and they always show the men's side, which is absolutely huge, and the women's side is like a third of the size, but you probably have the same amount of people that are wanting to go there. So at that point, we went to the wall, we touched it, and when we went back. The next day, two of my friends on our trip were practicing Christians. They went on an optional day trip with a tour group to go see Bethlehem and all the things associated with that. Myself and my other friend, we decided that we were going to stay in Jerusalem and go and try and see the Dome of the Rock. For those of you who don't know, a brief history without getting too much into the conflict side of things. Originally, the Temple Mount was built by the Jews, and it housed the temple where the Ark of the Covenant was. Very important site for Judaism. At some point, when the Muslims took over, for them, that particular site was important because Muhammad, the prophet, received a vision from angels, and the Temple Mount is where, during that vision, he ascended from earth into heaven. So a very significant spot. So when the Muslims took over Jerusalem, they built the Dome of the Rock, which is a very beautiful blue mosque, like octagonal structure with like a gold dome. And as well, they built the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which has a black dome separately. But the Dome of the Rock is built over the rock at which the point is that Muhammad ascended. But so yeah, a lot of political and religious connotations there, but a very significant place, like a place that's like has a lot of history around it, and a beautiful, beautiful building. So anyway, my friend and I decided to go and try and get onto it because they only let tourists on top of the Temple Mount at a certain time. It was not clear when that time was. We had asked a couple people and it kept changing, so we just kind of decided to take a chance and go see it. Luckily, we were able to get up there. Like I said, we had scarves with us because being dressed modestly at a religious site is just the respectful thing to do over there. So we used the scarves to like make sure that our shoulders and our necks were covered, but we didn't cover our hair. So we went up and we took a bunch of pictures in front of and around the Dome of the Rock. We didn't try to go inside. I don't know if that was because we weren't allowed or we just decided we didn't want to pay for it or whatever, but either way, we didn't go inside. Just had a nice time wandering around the Temple Mount and seeing what was going on. We didn't get to go into the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was a really great experience. Later that evening, my friends and I again went into the old city and we decided that we were gonna just walk around. So we went over to where Temple Mount is, and then we left through the gate by there and walked around kind of like the back of the walls of the old city. And as we were walking around the back towards the Mount of Olives, which I think was what my one friend really wanted to see, we realized that just outside the city was the Kidron Valley, which is a really important cemetery for Jerusalem, but also has these amazing rock-cut tombs. The two that I remember the names, or that I looked at the names of, which people may know, is Absalom's tomb and the tomb of Zechariah. Very similar in some ways in the style of what was done at Petra. And so we were like, oh, that's so cool. So there was like no one around, so we just took the steps down to the bottom of the valley and walked around and took pictures of the tombs and stuff, and then made it back to our hotel. Very interesting that we did that, because we told our tour guide about it the next day, and she was just like, what? You went there? Like, we're not allowed to take tours there anymore because the kids come and throw rocks at everyone. So I guess we must have gone at the perfect time when all the kids were in bed or whatever, or because we weren't a tourist group, they didn't feel like, I don't know, coming and being mischievous or whatever. But it was really cool that we got to inadvertently see this thing that not a lot of tourists get to see. The day after that, we went and did the Via Dolorosa, which is the route that Jesus walked with the cross, with all the different stations, which ended at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this church is built over three different kind of like important sites for the crucifixion of Jesus. One is like the spot where he was crucified, I believe, and then it's the spot where his body was laid out after the crucifixion, and then where his body was buried. These spots, whether or not these were the actual places where this happened, can't exactly say, but you know, obviously people think that they're hugely significant. So it was really interesting to see like all the pilgrims that were there and to walk around the church, even if that's not what you particularly subscribe to in terms of religion yourself. It was interesting to just see everything around it. The rock, the Golgotha rock, I believe is what it's called. I got to touch it. So yeah, our tour of Israel ended, and we then proceed on to Egypt, which begins with probably the longest car ride of my life. But that's for next time. While I feel like a bit ironic because with my field school one, I crammed like 6 weeks into like a 30-minute video, and with this one, I've crammed like a week and a couple days into what's probably going to end up being about a 30-minute video. But yeah, that's how the chunks, I think of them in my brain, like the 6 weeks, the Israel and then Egypt. But the next one is going to, in this kind of like series, is going to be about my time when I was visiting Egypt. I hope this is at least perhaps informative for people who are looking to do a trip to Israel, to talk about the different things that you can see while you're there. As per usual, I have all of my social media if you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter. If you guys have any comments, as I said, please keep them respectful, put them down below. If you like this video, please give me a big thumbs up. If you didn't like it, comment and tell me what it was that you think I could do better, because I'm always open for constructive, keyword constructive criticism. I'd like to say that I'm gonna do another video for you guys soon, but I don't know. So I would like to keep this channel going and not just kind of like let it peter off into nothing, but I may have said before, it's difficult to keep myself motivated when the amount of time that I put into it, I don't get a return of investment on. I really like hearing things from people that I've helped them and stuff. I work a 9-to-5 job, and on the weekends I sometimes have to spend it on other things. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!